Hello all, a very good day to all of you. This is Vilasini. Welcome to Simply Current Affairs. The topic of discussion for today is man-wildlife conflict or human-wildlife conflict. So this is based on multiple articles which were seen in news, where we have seen so many cases of elephants encroaching agricultural fields, of leopards coming into areas where civilians are living. So there have been so many articles about man-wildlife conflict. So let us understand what this is and why it is happening. So before entering into the topic straight, let us look at some background information. So yes, this topic features under the heading biodiversity. So in this context, we need to understand that when we talk about the major causes for biodiversity loss, right, there is a concept called as evil quadrate. What is this evil quadrate? Evil refers to something which is bad and quadrate refers to 4. So evil quadrate refers to 4 major causes for biodiversity loss. 4 major causes for biodiversity loss. So what are the 4 major causes? Number 1, you have what is called as habitat loss and degradation. Second, you have what is called as over exploitation. Third, you have what is called as alien species invasion. And fourth, we have what is called as co-extinction. Okay, habitat loss and fragmentation, sorry. Okay, here we can say habitat loss and fragmentation, overexploitation, alien species invasion and co-extinction. These are the 4 major causes for biodiversity loss. Okay, so in this context, we also need to understand, talking of habitat loss and fragmentation, one major impact of habitat loss and fragmentation is man-wildlife conflict. So let us talk about man-wildlife conflict in detail. So guys, please understand, in the earlier days, that is before industrialization, urbanization took place, right? If this was the forest region, right, and if this was the human settlement region, there was a certain amount of buffer which existed. And this buffer was very useful in ensuring that conflicts did not take place. But in recent times, what is happening is this buffer line is actually getting blurred. Why is this line getting blurred? Why? Because these settlements and human encroachment is taking place in regions where forests and other vegetation exists. Large amounts of forest lands are cleared to promote agriculture. Many mining projects are taking place in the forests, right? And as it is because of increased carbon emissions and climate change taking place, many animals in the forest are forced to enter into areas where humans are existing. And therefore, this is resulting in man-wildlife conflict. So man-wildlife conflict is nothing but an interaction between man and animal where the net effect of this interaction happens to be negative. Okay. So in recent times, you need to understand that there have been multiple causes for man-wildlife conflict, and addressing man-wildlife conflict is also there on the UN vision. Okay, especially for biodiversity conservation. So here we need to understand, talking of major causes, number 1, habitat loss and fragmentation, right? So for example, when the animal's habitat is there, you are laying down roads and railway lines, the existing habitat of the animal gets shrinked and fragmented, and this is causing man-wildlife conflict. Land degradation, especially with climate change taking place, water scarcity is happening, right? Animals are not getting the food that they require. So what happens is they enter into human areas, and this is also characterized by crop raiding, right? They raid onto agricultural fields. Next is overgrazing. Please understand, pastures meant for even wild animals, if they are going to be consumed by domesticated animals, right, it leaves behind very less food available for the animals in the forests, right? Next, lack of alternative livelihoods. Please understand, many people have been encroaching into the forests for different types of occupations like say mining, for poaching, right? And this is affecting and threatening the habitats of animals. Next is tourism, climate change, all these can be understood. Inadequate waste management. Let me talk to you about this. See, interestingly, if you note, many times in the village, when an animal dies, right, sometimes they do bury. But many times what they do is they just go to the outskirts of the village and dispose the animal. Please understand, the outskirts of the village is where the forest begins. So for the smell of the carcass also, the animal from outside, the animal from the forest tends to come outside and enters into the village and causes havoc. Okay, so all these are the major causes. So now that you've understood causes, let us go ahead and understand effects. Talking about effects of man-animal conflict, number one, yes, if frequent crop raiding is going to take place, then food security is going to be a challenge. Next year, major thing, there could be damage to human life, there could be damage to infrastructure and property, right? Many people who live in the regions where frequent man-wildlife conflict is taking place tend to be displaced and they have to be relocated as well, right? So rehabilitation programs needs to be done, right? And yes, a significant amount of government expenditure might also go in for promoting predictive measures to ensure that man-wildlife conflicts impacts are being reduced, right? Apart from that, if you see, these are the major outcomes or the major impacts of man-wildlife conflict. Yes, and many people also say it can cause diseases. Now look at this image, right? You have a group of bears looking into a dustbin, right? So this could unleash a new disease also. The world has only now overcome the harmful impacts of COVID-19 and we are still recovering, right? We are not ready for another epidemic or a pandemic, right? But such a situation should not arise as well. So here in this context, these are the effects and consequences of man-wildlife conflict. Talking of solutions, there are many solutions, but what many environmentalists and conservationists vouch for is, they say, consider what is called as NBS. What is this NBS? Nature-based solutions. In very simple terms, for today's pressing problems like pollution and climate change, rather than being dependent on say technological interventions, why not use nature as a solution? This is called as nature-based solutions. For example, in the context of man-wildlife conflict, people have suggested why not use biofences instead of fences which have high voltage lines running in them because it can cause electrocution of animals. They have suggested why not use biofences made of sturdy material like bamboo. This is one, it is sturdy, it offers protection and it also does not cause damage to the animal's life. This is one. Second, many people have also proposed the concept of jumbo gardens, especially it is being followed in Northeast India. So jumbo gardens, the idea is very simple. For example, if this is the forest, and if this is the agricultural field. Now usually the animal from the forest comes into the field, raids the field. But what if in this buffer region, right, you plant bananas or you have significant banana plantations? The animal will come, the animal will raid into this region, eat and go back into the forest, right? So this concept is called as that of jumbo gardens, which can also be employed. Next, what many people have also suggested is also using certain varieties of plants which is disliked by the animal. For example, if you see lemongrass. Lemongrass is not just a mosquito repellent, but it is also an elephant repellent, right? So to protect agricultural fields, you can even have lemongrass plants which are being cultivated. And this can also ward off the animal. This can also be promoted, right? And yes, also new innovations can be brought about. For example, way back earlier, there was an innovative idea called as Plan B. This Plan B was a brainchild of the Northeastern Frontier Railways. The logic was simple. Across many forests in the northeastern region, there are many railway tracks which cut through these forests. Sometimes many elephants trying to cross these tracks collide with the trains and this causes great damage to life and property. So they came up with an innovative idea called as Plan B. The idea was very simple. Across the entire railway track, they are going to be installing speakers, and these speakers, if you see, are going to be producing the buzz sound of bees. these speakers are going to be producing the buzz sound of bees, and this is disliked by elephants, and therefore they may not enter into this particular site. So this is also a very innovative idea which is being vouched for, right? So overall, these are different ways in which, right, nature-based solutions, or rather innovative solutions, to address man-wildlife conflict. So in this context, what we have ideally done is we have tried understanding the major causes for biodiversity loss. We have tried understanding what is man-wildlife conflict, the causes, the impacts, and talking about solutions. We have also explored, right, nature-based solutions to deal with man-wildlife conflict. Let us now take a look at a topic from climate change. So in this context, we will be talking about carbon capture and storage. But before this, let us take a look at some important basic areas. Okay, so number one, let us understand few terms. So first, what is carbon source? Next, what is carbon sink? When I talk about carbon source, it is the site from which the emissions take place. When I talk about carbon sink, it is a site in which the carbon is captured and stored. Now, the process by which carbon is captured from the source and is stored in the sink, this is known by the term carbon sequestration. So let me tell you, year on year, UPSC has always loved asking questions based on carbon, especially terminologies, right? They have tested in the past what are some good sites for carbon sequestration. They've also asked a question from different types of carbon, right? Let's quickly recall this. What are the different types of carbon? Number one, we have what is called as green carbon. What is green carbon? Carbon stored in plants and in plant parts. It's called green carbon. Next, we have what is called as brown carbon, right? So what is brown carbon? When organic matter is being burnt, the carbon which is released is called as brown carbon. Next is blue carbon. Okay, now this blue carbon was only a previous year question. Now what is this blue carbon? Carbon captured and stored in oceans is called as blue carbon. Next, there is also something which is called as black carbon. What is black carbon? Carbon which is being released on incomplete combustion of fossil fuels is called as black carbon, right? So this black carbon is a very notorious pollutant. So now in this context, we have also tried understanding the different types of carbon. So let us straight away understand what is this carbon capture and storage. So number one, here we're talking about a set of technologies which involve capturing the carbon emissions at source, right, before it is being released into the air. So here when we talk about the different types of carbon capture and storage, we're talking about carbon sinks, places or sites where carbon can be naturally captured and stored. Example, peatlands, marshlands, trees in the forest, peatlands, all of these are important sites for carbon sinks. Next, when we talk about deep saline formations, right, so between sedimentary rocks, right, they can be, CO2 can be injected into them and can be stored. Fine. Next is abandoned mines. Abandoned mines are also very good sites for storing carbon emissions. Okay. Next, what is the process of carbon capture and storage? Number one, capture. So what is capture? So here, before the emissions are being released from the industries, we capture the carbon emissions at the source itself. Next is transportation. This captured carbon emissions through pipelines, right, needs to be sent into a particular site where it has to be stored. So storage is the final step, either in natural reservoirs or in or below the ground, or say even in deep saline formations or abandoned mines. Storage can be done. So next, we also need to understand what are the benefits, simple benefits. So number one, if you see, carbon dioxide emissions are known for causing global warming and climate change. So therefore, reducing the carbon emissions at source itself helps in addressing global warming and climate change largely, right? So this is one. Second, here if you also see, right, this carbon which is captured can be used in different industries and can have vital range of applications, right? So here what we can do is it can contribute to improving energy security as well and reducing India's dependence on imports or over reliance on imports, right? Third is overall it can also help in reducing the carbon footprint. For that also it could be very useful. And next, If you talk about India's updated NDCs, right, the nationally determined contributions, what are they? Voluntary pledges made by different countries to fulfill the commitments in the Paris Agreement. India has also mentioned over here that by 2070, we will have net zero carbon emissions. So for achieving this long-term goal also, carbon capture storage can be very, very useful. Okay. So next in this context, we'll also understand this term, carbon capture and utilization. So now this carbon which is captured can also be used to produce different goods, right? They can find applications in different industries like cement, concrete fuels, carbon fibers, graphenes, baking soda, etc. So this is nothing but carbon capture and utilization, right? So in this context, we will try solving a previous year question. In the context of mitigating the impending global warming due to the anthropogenic emissions of carbon dioxide, which of the following can be potential sites for carbon sequestration? Many times UPSC gives very long statements, but here the crux is, which of the following are potential sites for carbon sequestration? Abandoned and uneconomic coal seams, depleted oil and gas reserves, subterranean deep saline formations. The answer is all of the above, right? So I hope the discussion was useful. Thank you and all the very best.